It was 1 o'clock in the morning when my daughter fell against my front door. Bruises darkened her eyes and her lips were torn open. Through her tears, she told me the truth. My husband struck me because of the other woman. I wrapped my arms around her without speaking. I brought her inside the house, and then, saying nothing, I dressed in my police uniform. Once prepared, I loaded the ammunition. After that, I called my attorney. Begin executing the plan immediately. I'm grateful you found this video. If you're viewing it now, please like it, subscribe to this channel, and share in the comments which part of the world you're hearing my revenge story from. I'm curious to see how widely it has traveled. I had just switched off the television and collapsed onto the couch, my eyelids heavy, following a draining and lengthy shift. Working as a police officer in this community wasn't always filled with life-threatening situations. However, that particular day, I had to intervene in a brawl at a bar in the city center and then complete paperwork until the earliest hours. My entire body ached with exhaustion. All I craved was deep, uninterrupted sleep. Out on the street, dogs were barking while motorcycles rumbled past, ridden by teenagers from the area racing through. It was already 1 in the morning, yet the community remained restless and awake. I assumed the group was gathered at the street corner, smoking cigarettes and drinking beer as they did every evening, I told myself. I shut my eyes, attempting to block out the disturbances so my mind could finally rest. Without warning, urgent pounding erupted at the entrance, so forceful it startled me upright. My pulse quickened, and my law enforcement training activated instantly. Who would be knocking in such a manner at this time? I moved swiftly toward the door, gripping a chair firmly as a precaution. "Who's there?" I called out, my tone slightly unsteady, not because I was frightened, but because I sensed something terrible was unfolding. Silence. Only a few more taps came, softer this time, accompanied by a strangled, quivering voice. "Mother, please open the door." I nearly froze solid. It was Sarah's voice, my daughter. I fumbled with the locks urgently, my heart hammering against my ribs. The moment I pulled the door open, Sarah fell into my embrace, shaking like an injured creature. I held her firmly, feeling her weakened body as though every bit of her energy had been drained away. "Sarah, what's happened to you, sweetheart?" I asked, my voice cracking. The yellow light from the porch illuminated her face, and what I witnessed paralyzed me. Her lip had been split wide, with crusted blood at the edge, her left eye purple and grotesquely swollen, barely able to stay open. She clutched her midsection with both hands as though attempting to conceal an injury. "My husband! He attacked me!" "Because of his mistress," Sarah whispered hoarsely before dissolving into agonizing sobs. I felt fury surge through my veins, yet simultaneously, my heart shattered. My daughter, whom I had nurtured and cherished above my own existence, stood before me, completely destroyed. I assisted her indoors. I positioned her on the couch and hurried to the kitchen for a moistened towel and medical supplies. "Don't move, sweetheart. Let me examine you," I said, attempting to maintain composure, though internally I was falling apart. I delicately wiped away the blood from her lip, but it continued flowing, bright crimson, as though it were slicing through my own heart. The wound ran deep. This wasn't merely superficial damage. It appeared to contain far more profound harm. Sarah continued gripping her abdomen, her slender fingers trembling. Gently, I moved her hands aside. I raised her shirt, and dear God, I nearly let the towel slip from my grasp. An enormous bruise, dark black and deep purple, spread across her stomach as though she had been struck not just once, but repeatedly with vicious intent. I felt unable to draw breath, as if those blows had landed on me instead. "Sarah, who inflicted this upon you? It was Robert, correct?" I demanded, my voice shaking with both fury and anguish. Sarah offered no response. She simply wept, and her cries shattered the stillness of the home. Without hesitation, I seized the telephone and dialed the number I had memorized for our community's emergency medical facility. "Dr. Figueroa, please prepare yourself. I'm transporting my daughter to you," I stated hurriedly. My vehicle was at the repair shop having brake work done, so I contacted a taxi service. While we waited, I positioned myself beside Sarah. I draped a blanket over her so she wouldn't feel cold. Her cellular phone, which she had set on the table, kept illuminating repeatedly. From where I sat, I noticed 7 unanswered calls from Robert and several messages displaying on the locked screen. "Keep your mouth shut if you don't want to lose everything." I felt blood rushing to my temples. I extended my hand to grab the phone. I wanted to examine more, to discover what else he had done to her. But Sarah, despite her weakness, snatched it away from me in a panic. "Mother, don't look at that. It doesn't matter." She stared at me with eyes filled with terror, as if merely touching that device would cause everything to collapse. I didn't push the issue. I simply squeezed her hand to provide comfort. "I'm right here, sweetheart. Nothing will harm you now." Yet internally, I understood this situation had already escalated far beyond acceptable limits. When the taxi pulled up, I helped Sarah climb inside, supporting her with one arm while awkwardly managing a bag with the other. During the drive to the medical facility, Sarah was hunched forward, her head resting against my shoulder, repeating continuously, "I'm sorry, Mother. I didn't mean to disturb you at this hour, but I couldn't endure it any longer. I had to flee here." Every statement she made felt like a blade piercing my heart. I was her mother. I had vowed to shield her throughout her entire life. And now she had been forced to seek me out in the dead of night, shattered by the man I had once placed my trust in. The taxi came to a stop before the hospital, where harsh white light from a neon sign illuminated the words "Emergency Entrance." I assisted Sarah in exiting, my daughter who could scarcely remain upright. Her body continued trembling, and she pressed against her stomach as if clinging to her final reserves of strength. I gripped her hand, attempting to mask how my own heart was racing frantically. "I'm with you. There's nothing to fear," I murmured, though I was terrified as well. Dr. Leticia Figueroa, who was working that night, stood waiting for us at the entrance. She glanced at Sarah, then at me with a concerned expression, but remained silent. She simply gestured for a nurse to escort my daughter to an examination area. I followed, my feet feeling weighted like lead. When the nurse removed Sarah's lightweight jacket, I nearly gasped audibly. Beyond the bruising on her face, her shoulders and wrists were covered in marks of brutality, purple and reddish contusions like silent testimonies. I stood motionless, gripping the edge of a table, containing the rage burning inside my chest. "What did this monster do to you?" I thought, but I didn't dare voice it aloud, fearing Sarah would begin crying again. Dr. Figueroa meticulously documented each injury, her expression serious. "We need to perform an X-ray examination to determine if she has any fractured ribs," she stated, her tone grave yet steady. I nodded without speaking, simply observing Sarah lying there, her eyes shut as if attempting to escape from reality. While I waited for the test results, I went downstairs to the reception area to complete her treatment documentation and provide a deposit payment. My cellular phone kept vibrating continuously. An unidentified number displayed on the screen. I recognized it instantly. If someone was calling at this time, immediately after Sarah had arrived at my residence, it could only be Robert. Fury coursed through me, and I disconnected the call without even answering. He didn't deserve to speak with me, not after what he had inflicted. When I returned to the room, Sarah had drifted into a shallow sleep, likely from complete exhaustion. I adjusted the blanket over her, my hands still shaking. Observing her face, I recalled the Sarah from earlier times, the joyful young girl who used to chase after me in the backyard, calling out, "Mother, watch me." Now that smile had vanished. Replaced by wounds and fear, I sat beside the bed, watching her sleep, my heart in fragments. I was her mother. I had promised to protect her, and I had allowed her to fall into the hands of someone like Robert. I blamed myself, yet simultaneously, a flame of determination started burning within me. I couldn't permit my daughter to continue suffering. Never again. After they administered an IV and she became stable, I transported Sarah to our home. I prepared her a glass of heated milk, positioned it beside her bed, and closed the door softly, ensuring she was sleeping. It was nearly daybreak. Dim light filtered through the window. I stepped onto the porch to organize things a bit, and I noticed Mrs. Camilla, the neighbor, across the road, sweeping her yard. When she spotted me, she rushed over. Her voice sounded hurried. "Did something occur at your residence last night, Elizabeth?" I heard knocking at the door and some weeping. I exhaled and concisely explained to her that Sarah had been assaulted by her husband, that he had expelled her from their home, and she had been forced to seek refuge here in the middle of the night. Mrs. Camilla clenched her teeth, her eyes flashing with anger. How could he dare to treat his wife in such a manner? That man possesses no shame. I nodded in agreement, saying nothing more. However, I felt I had gained an ally. Suddenly, I remembered that Mrs. Camilla had a security camera at her entrance. "Listen, Mrs. Camilla, might your camera have captured anything last night?" I inquired. She nodded right away, opened the application on her phone, and displayed the footage to me. I recorded the scene on my device, showing Sarah at my door, knocking desperately, her faint cries echoing through the night. Witnessing that image made my heart ache all over again. But simultaneously, I recognized it would serve as crucial evidence. I took Mrs. Camilla's hand and expressed my gratitude from the depths of my soul. She simply patted my hand and stated firmly, "Don't forget to obtain justice for that young woman. I have confidence you can achieve it." I entered my bedroom, opened the wardrobe, and gazed at my police uniform hanging perfectly. The blue shirt, the khaki trousers, the belt, and the weapon holster. Everything appeared to be waiting for me. I took each item, feeling the coarse fabric beneath my fingers. In silence, I dressed, fastening each button, adjusting the belt. Each action felt like making a vow. I wasn't solely Sarah's mother. I was also a law enforcement officer, and I would utilize everything at my disposal to protect her. When I completed dressing, I picked up the telephone and contacted James Ellison, our family attorney. His voice sounded groggy on the other end. "Hello?" I kept it brief. "James, initiate the plan right now." He remained quiet for a moment and then inquired, "Elizabeth, are you certain?" I responded without a moment of doubt. "Absolutely. Make preparations." I disconnected and proceeded to the living room. I retrieved my digital camera from a drawer. I approached the bed where Sarah was sleeping, carefully pulled back the blanket, and began photographing each of her injuries. The torn lip, the swollen eye, the bruising on her abdomen. Every time the flash illuminated, I felt I wasn't only recording the physical wounds, but also the profound damage to her spirit. When I finished, I seated myself at the dining room table and arranged all the documents and the USB drive containing the footage from Mrs. Camilla's residence. I connected the drive to my laptop and meticulously backed everything up. Sitting there observing the screen illuminate, I understood that from that moment forward, there was no possibility of retreat. I had entered into a battle not simply for Sarah, but for the justice I had sworn to uphold. By the time I completed backing up the footage from Mrs. Camilla's camera, the clock displayed 8 in the morning. Sarah remained deeply asleep in bed, her face swollen and her lips dried and cracked, as if she couldn't escape the suffering even in her dreams. I quietly entered the kitchen and prepared a bowl of chicken soup. The aroma of onion and herbs permeated the air. I brought the tray to her bedside and awakened her gently. She opened her eyes, her gaze exhausted, and appeared surprised to see me there dressed in my police uniform. "Mother," she murmured, then shook her head. "I have no appetite." I sat beside her, attempting to make my voice as tender as possible. "To be strong and advance forward, you must eat." Sarah looked at me, her eyes becoming watery, and reluctantly took the spoon, swallowing with difficulty. Seeing her in this state squeezed my heart. Just a few years earlier, Sarah had been a radiant young woman, perpetually smiling, filling the home with happiness. Now she was here, shattered, a mere shadow of her previous self. I decided to transport her back to the hospital for another examination. The bruising on her stomach concerned me. Dr. Leticia Figueroa received us in the emergency area, her face serious, but without expressing much. She ordered a CT scan to ensure there was no internal bleeding present. While we awaited the results, I sat in the waiting area, removed my laptop, and connected the USB drive. The footage appeared on the screen. At 1:02 in the morning, Sarah stood at my front entrance, knocking desperately, her muffled sobs resonating through the microphone. Witnessing that image made my heart ache once more, as if I were experiencing that night again. I copied the footage to an external hard drive and password protected it, taking care with every detail. I understood what I was doing wasn't simply to protect Sarah, but to construct a wall of evidence against Robert. Just at that moment, Sarah's cellular phone rang. The screen displayed Robert Mendes. I felt my heart stop beating. I grabbed the phone before Sarah could react and powered it off immediately. Sarah looked at me terrified. "Mother, if he discovers I spoke, he won't leave me alone." Her voice trembled as if the simple mention of his name plunged her into darkness. I squeezed her hand tightly, attempting to calm her. "I'm with you, darling. Nothing will harm you." However, I said nothing more. I simply looked at the clock silently. It was nearly 10 o'clock in the morning. I removed the SIM card from Sarah's phone and inserted another one I had prepared. I didn't want him to locate her. I didn't want him to possess the opportunity to threaten her again. The CT scan results returned a few minutes later, confirming that Sarah had several severe soft tissue contusions, but fortunately, no internal bleeding. I exhaled in relief, but the comfort was fleeting. The wounds on Sarah's body would heal eventually, but the ones in her spirit, I understood, would require considerably more time. I transported her home and contacted James Ellison, the attorney. "I possess the medical records and the footage from the neighbor's camera," I informed him directly. He scheduled a meeting at his office later that afternoon to collect the evidence. Meanwhile, Mrs. Camilla arrived with a pot of chicken broth still steaming hot. "This is for Sarah to regain her strength," she said with her kind voice. "If you require a witness, count on me." I looked at her, feeling her genuine support, and my heart felt slightly stronger. In the afternoon, Sarah attempted to rest, but she would awaken suddenly from nightmares. I sat beside her, attempting to calm her, but she simply murmured fearfully. Robert shoved me and Denise. She stood in a corner ridiculing me. Hearing that, I felt blood rushing to my head. "Who is Denise?" I demanded, my voice shaking with rage. Sarah explained to me in a faint voice that Denise was Robert's mistress, that she had visited their residence several times, shamelessly displaying arrogance, provoking Robert to unleash his anger on her. Her account felt like a knife in my heart. I had shared meals at the same table as Robert. I had believed he was a decent man who would care for my daughter, and now it turned out he wasn't only betraying her, but permitting another woman to humiliate her in her own home. Sitting beside the bed, I removed my cellular phone and captured close-up photographs of the bruises on Sarah's wrists, including her watch to display the precise time. With every photograph I captured, I felt I wasn't only documenting the physical wounds, but also the suffering my daughter carried. I understood these photographs would serve as evidence, but they were also a reminder of what I needed to do to protect her. In the afternoon, I transported Sarah to James's office, carrying a portfolio containing all the evidence I had collected. He opened it and spread everything on the table: the photographs of the injuries, the medical report, and the footage on the USB. James nodded, his voice steady. "This constitutes a fairly solid foundation. Now we simply need to prove public adultery, and he'll have nowhere to flee." I gripped the handle of my purse, understanding perfectly well what my next action was. I was no longer simply a grieving mother. I was a law enforcement officer, and I would utilize everything at my disposal to make Robert pay. That evening, I didn't transport Sarah to my residence. I didn't want her to be in a location where Robert could locate her. Instead, I left her at Mrs. Camilla's house, my trusted neighbor. She welcomed her into her home to stay the night, and vowed to keep a vigilant eye on her. I returned home alone, my heart heavy. I removed my police uniform and put on an old jacket and jeans, attempting to appear like an ordinary person and not an officer searching for evidence. I retrieved the digital camera from the drawer, verified the battery and memory card, and departed in my old vehicle. Every rotation of the tires reminded me that I was entering into a battle not simply for Sarah, but for the justice I had sworn to uphold. I parked the vehicle in a darkened alley near the Arches bar, the location Sarah had informed me Robert frequented. The neon illumination from the establishment lit up a section of the street. I sat in the vehicle, crouched down, camera in hand, waiting. Around 8 o'clock in the evening, Robert's silver truck appeared, its headlights sweeping across the alley. My heart raced, but I remained composed and activated the camera, prepared. A few minutes later, a woman emerged from the corner. She wore a fitted red dress. Her lips were painted a deep shade, and a cigarette was in her hand. She walked with a provocative confidence. I recognized her immediately. It was Denise Salgado, the woman Sarah had told me about, Robert's mistress, the one who had caused my daughter to suffer. Robert switched off the engine, exited, and opened the door for Denise, wrapping his arm around her waist with familiarity. Witnessing him, I felt my blood boiling. He, the one who had sat down to eat in my home, the one who had addressed me as mother-in-law, was now embracing another woman while my daughter lay in a bed covered with bruises. I captured photograph after photograph. The neon illumination from the bar clearly lit up their faces. Each photograph felt like a stab, but also another piece in the puzzle I was assembling to unmask him. I followed them from a distance to a small hotel with a flashing red light sign. I didn't approach closely, simply remained far away and captured a couple more photographs of them entering the lobby hand in hand. Then I circled around to the parking area and photographed Robert's truck license plate, ensuring a nearby digital clock displayed the time. Each photograph was ammunition, and I understood I possessed what would leave him with no escape. When I arrived home, I opened my laptop and transferred all the photographs to a special password-protected folder. I contacted James, the attorney, with a determination I couldn't conceal. I possessed the photographs of his infidelity. You can observe their faces. You can observe the vehicle's license plate. James responded with a steady voice. Excellent, Elizabeth. Keep them secure. Don't let him discover you possess them. I nodded, although he couldn't see me, feeling slightly more relieved, understanding I was one step closer to justice. Just at that moment, my cellular phone vibrated. It was Sarah calling from Mrs. Camilla's number. Her voice sounded distressed. Mother, he just contacted a friend of mine to inquire where I am. When she informed him she didn't know, he threatened her as well. I'm terrified. Hearing Sarah, I felt my heart constrict. My daughter, even though she had escaped, Robert continued tormenting her with his threats. I reassured her. You remain calm. Stay at Mrs. Camilla's residence. I have him under surveillance. However, internally, I understood I needed to act more quickly before he discovered a method to harm Sarah again. I immediately contacted Commander Rosales, a trusted colleague at the station. I presented him with all the evidence I had collected, the footage from Mrs. Camilla, Sarah's medical history, and the photographs of the infidelity. I need you to dispatch a patrol to monitor the neighborhood, especially Mrs. Camilla's residence, I stated, my voice firm. Rosales agreed without hesitation, but not without issuing a warning first. Elizabeth, what you're undertaking is extremely dangerous, but if you possess sufficient evidence, I'm confident you'll prevail. I thanked him and provided him with a copy of the infidelity photographs in case something happened to me. That evening, I couldn't sleep at all. I sat at the dining room table, organizing all the data into files, proof of the injuries, the camera footage, and the photographs of the infidelity. Each file felt like an accusation, one more step to bring Robert to light. However, in my heart, I couldn't shake the pain. I had once regarded him as a son. I had believed he would protect Sarah, and now, not only had he betrayed her, but he had dared to raise his hand to her, to threaten her, all for another woman. That pain, like a deep incision, hurt me every time I thought about Sarah's bruises. The following morning, I transported Sarah to Anna Quiroga, a psychologist James had recommended. Sarah required assistance to overcome the trauma of the days of abuse. I remained in the waiting area, my heart heavy. Watching my daughter walk into the office, walking slowly with her shoulders slumped, felt like a stone on my chest. I, who believed I was a strong mother, a tough law enforcement officer, had failed to protect her from the man I trusted. That pain, like a deep incision, hurt me every time I remembered Sarah's bruised face. While I sat there, my phone vibrated. It was Romero Alcazar, the director of the Public Property Registry, whom I knew from some previous transactions. His voice sounded grave and somewhat rushed. "Mrs. Arriaga, it's not advisable to speak extensively on the phone, but I just observed your name and your daughter's on a land transfer document. Something unusual. If you have time, you should visit." I frowned, not comprehending what he was referring to. Sarah and I hadn't completed any transfer documentation, but a negative feeling made me stand up immediately. I informed Anna I would return for Sarah later. When I arrived at the public registry, Romero gestured for me to enter his office. He opened a file, frowning. "There's something unusual here. This land was transferred to a Denise Salgado last week, but since you didn't contact me to confirm, I found it peculiar." I froze. I felt my blood turn cold. "It's impossible," I exclaimed. My voice choked. "Sarah and I never signed anything." Romero shook his head and handed me the file. "The signatures are here with your name and your daughter's, and the transaction has already been filed." I took the document and observed shaky signatures which resembled nothing like ours. I immediately inquired, "Who delivered these documents?" Romero replied in a subdued voice, "The employee informed me it was your son-in-law, Robert. He stated you had requested him to handle it because you were occupied." Hearing that, I felt my blood boiling. Robert had not only struck Sarah, not only betrayed her, but he had dared to forge our signatures to steal the land, my father's inheritance, what my family had cared for throughout the years. I attempted to remain composed and requested a photocopy of the file from Romero. He exhaled. Someone from within here certainly assisted him with the documentation. Before I departed, he whispered, "Elizabeth, this is dangerous. Be cautious that no one in the office discovers I informed you." I nodded, thanked him, and vowed not to betray him. However, internally, I felt like I was walking on pins and needles. Robert wasn't simply a violent man. He was a manipulator, willing to do anything to achieve his objectives. In the afternoon, I retrieved Sarah from her therapy. She appeared exhausted, but her gaze was no longer one of panic. I transported her directly to Attorney James's office with the photocopy of the forged documents. James reviewed them carefully, tapping the table with his fingers, and stated firmly, "This is the final nail in the coffin. Now we also possess proof of fraud, sufficient for him to have no escape." Sarah, sitting beside me, listened in silence, but her eyes filled with tears. "Mother, he dared to forge the signatures to steal grandfather's land," she said with a trembling voice, both pained and indignant. I took her hand and squeezed it, attempting to give her some strength. However, I was also battling my own pain. That land wasn't simply a property. It was a memory. It was my father's labor, something our family had cared for across generations, and Robert had dared to trample all over it simply for his ambition and his betrayal. That evening, I met with Commander Rosales and provided him with the copy of the fraudulent documents. He nodded, his gaze serious. "Your evidence is extremely solid. I assure you he won't escape." I thanked him, but I still carried a weight on my heart. When I arrived home, I secured all the documents in the small safe in my bedroom. The clock displayed nearly midnight, but I wasn't sleepy whatsoever. I sat in the darkness thinking about Robert, about what he had done to Sarah, to our family. That pain, like a slow fire, burned and drove me simultaneously. I understood the time had arrived to confront him directly. There was no alternative option. On Saturday morning, I left Sarah at Mrs. Camilla's residence, the safest location for her at that moment. Commander Rosales had someone monitoring outside, and I understood she would be protected, but my heart wasn't at ease. I put on civilian clothing, an old jacket and jeans. However, I concealed a file in my bag with the evidence I had carefully prepared. The photographs of Sarah's injuries, the footage from the neighbor's camera, the hospital report, and the photocopy of the fraudulent land documents. I drove my old vehicle to Robert's pawn shop, the location where he conducted his business and displayed his power in the community. Every rotation of the tires reminded me that this wasn't a simple trip, but an inevitable confrontation. The pawn shop was open. An odor of machine oil and cigarette smoke struck me in the face. Two of Robert's henchmen were arranging items on the shelves and cast me a sideways glance when I entered. One of them smiled mockingly. "Look, the mother-in-law has arrived." I ignored them and walked directly to the rear office where Robert sat, counting money with stacks of dollar bills piled on a wooden desk. He glanced up and offered a fake smile. "What's going on, police mother-in-law? Are you so unoccupied that you have time to visit your son-in-law?" His voice carried sarcasm, but I paid him no attention. I hadn't arrived to argue or chat. I placed the file on his desk. Each page felt like an accusation. The photographs of Sarah's bruises, the footage from Mrs. Camilla's camera with my daughter's cries in the early morning, the hospital report detailing her injuries, and the photocopy of the fraudulent documents he had dared to sign for me and for Sarah. Robert glanced at them. His face transformed for an instant, but he quickly regained his air of confidence, concealing it with a contemptuous smile. "And what about these insignificant papers? I possess superior lawyers than you." I looked him in the eyes, my voice cold. "I didn't arrive to argue with you. If you want to determine who's correct, we'll encounter each other in court." He jumped upright, his voice restrained as if I had wounded his pride. "Who's going to dare to confront me? Who's going to oppose me in this community?" I didn't flinch. I looked him directly in his arrogant eyes. "I will. Don't assume everyone fears you." The two individuals at the entrance attempted to approach, but I placed my hand in my jacket pocket, revealing my police badge. They stopped immediately, their gazes evasive. Robert turned crimson, slammed the table forcefully, and nearly shouted, "Your daughter is feeble. She deserved to be disciplined, and don't assume that badge will perpetually save you." Hearing that, I felt my blood boiling. He dared to state that Sarah, my daughter, whom I cherished more than my own life, deserved to be disciplined. He dared to justify the bruises, the night Sarah had to flee in agony. I wanted to scream at him. I wanted to lunge at him and grab him by the throat. However, I restrained myself. I didn't respond, simply collected the file in silence, placed it in my bag, and turned to depart. Before I exited, I turned back and stated firmly, "Just so you comprehend clearly, from this moment forward, the rules of the game have transformed. It's not you who's going to discipline anyone. It's the law that's going to discipline you." Robert shouted at my back, "If you walk out that door, you cease being my mother-in-law. And then don't complain if I become vicious." I stopped, looked at him one final time without a trace of fear. "Well, consider that from this moment forward, you are no longer my daughter's husband." I exited onto the street where the wind was kicking up dust from the dirt road. I climbed in the vehicle and immediately contacted James. "It's time to file the lawsuit." James replied, his voice calm but cautious. "Very well, prepare yourself. He's going to counterattack with everything he possesses." I nodded, though he couldn't see me. My heart felt as cold as steel. I understood this battle wouldn't be simple, but I was prepared. A few days following my confrontation with Robert at the pawn shop, rumors began spreading through the neighborhood like wildfire. Early in the morning, I went to the market for some vegetables, attempting to act normally. But the whispers reached my ears. Two ladies at the corner stall were whispering, "That Sarah likely fabricated it all. They claim she talked back to her husband excessively. That's why he struck her." I walked past them and they fell silent, but their gazes followed me as if I were the one causing problems. In the cafe beside it, an elderly man sipped his coffee and shook his head. Elizabeth is now utilizing her badge to destroy her son-in-law. Hearing that felt like a dagger in my chest. These individuals who greeted me every morning, who smiled at Sarah when she was a child, now so easily believed Robert's lies. I lowered my head and quickened my pace, attempting not to let them observe my eyes welling up with tears. At midday, James contacted me to his office. He positioned a stack of documents in front of me, his voice grave. Robert just hired Hector Valdivia, an attorney from Mexico City. He filed a countersuit. He claims Sarah fabricated everything to extort him and that you're abusing your authority as a police officer. I took the lawsuit. I observed Valdivia's signature in blue ink, still fresh. The words on the document felt like direct accusations against Sarah and me, as if we were the villains, the ones attempting to ruin Robert's life. Sarah, sitting beside me, turned pale and stated with a trembling voice, "Mother, he wants to portray me as a liar." Seeing her, I felt my heart clench. Sarah, my sweet daughter, now had to endure not only the bruises on her body, but also the slander of the man she once loved. I took her hand and squeezed it, attempting to give her some strength. However, internally I felt an indescribable pain. I had believed this community where I was born and raised would be on our side. However, now it appeared the entire world was turning its back on us. In the afternoon, I transported Sarah to Mrs. Camilla's residence. As we passed through an alley, I observed Robert's two henchmen standing there smoking, staring at us. One of them lifted his chin and stated sarcastically, "Be cautious. Individuals around here believe Robert more than you." I didn't respond, simply squeezed Sarah's hand and escorted her into the house. However, those words felt like stones thrown at my heart, making me feel more isolated than ever. I immediately contacted Rosales to inform him of the threat. He promised to reinforce patrols at night, but his voice also sounded concerned. "Elizabeth, be cautious. That individual is attempting everything to reverse the situation." I nodded and thanked him, but internally I understood I was walking an extremely dangerous path. That evening, I went to the corner store to purchase something to eat. The owner, an acquaintance of many years, took me to a corner and whispered, "Elizabeth, be cautious. Individuals are stating everywhere that you fabricated everything to take the land from your son-in-law." Hearing that, a chill ran down my spine. The individuals who had been my neighbors, with whom I had shared stories, now believed I was a schemer. I thanked her, attempted to smile, but as I exited the store, I felt the world was collapsing on me. When I arrived home, I discovered an unmarked envelope slipped beneath the door. Inside, a note in scribbled handwriting. "Remain silent or you lose your daughter." I took the document. My hands trembled, but not from fear. I was furious. Furious because Robert dared to threaten my daughter. Furious because the individuals around me were so easily manipulated. I carefully filed the note in the evidence file, understanding it would be another piece to unmask him. Late at night, I had an emergency meeting with James at his office. He observed the threatening note and nodded slightly. Excellent. The dirtier he plays, the more he entangles himself. However, public opinion is on his side. We require a strong blow to transform things. And the only one who can do that is Denise. Hearing James mention Denise, I felt a small light of hope ignite in the darkness. Denise, Robert's mistress, could be the key to reversing the situation. However, at the same time, I understood bringing her to our side wouldn't be simple. I stood there in the dim light of the office, thinking about Sarah, about the bruises on her body, about the lies that were suffocating us. That pain, like a slow fire, burned and drove me simultaneously. I wasn't going to permit Robert to win. I wasn't going to permit his lies to conceal the truth. The day following the tense confrontation at the pawn shop, I discovered that Denise used to frequent a small bar at the end of Hidalgo Street. I understood it was my opportunity to alter the course of the game, to reverse the tables on the hand Robert believed he had won. I put on a baggy jacket and a cap, attempting to go unnoticed. When I entered the establishment, ranchera music was blasting. Cigarette smoke hung in the atmosphere, and the smell of beer and tequila mixed in the environment. I selected a table in a dark corner, sat down, and kept my eyes on the entrance. I didn't want to be recognized. I didn't want any of Robert's associates to observe me before I could speak with Denise. Around 10 at night she appeared. In a short fitted dress, her lips painted a deep crimson and a cocktail in her hand. She walked with a confidence that appeared forced. I looked at her and felt a mixture of anger and pity. This was the woman who had contributed to my daughter's suffering. But simultaneously, I understood she was also merely a pawn in Robert's game. I took a deep breath, stood up, and sat across from her. Denise raised an eyebrow, her voice defensive. "And who are you?" I didn't respond right away, simply placed an envelope on the table in silence. Inside was a copy of the fraudulent land documents Robert had schemed, along with a bank statement for Denise filled with accumulated debts and the risk of foreclosure. I looked her in the eyes and stated sharply, "I'm Robert's mother-in-law. If you remain on his side, you'll go down with him. But if you cooperate, you'll save yourself." Denise let out a mocking laugh, but it vanished from her face as soon as she opened the envelope and observed the documents. She turned pale. Her gaze faltered as she observed the forged signature on the transfer and the red numbers of her debts. I continued in a cold but firm voice. "The police commander already knows everything. As soon as the trial begins, you'll be called to testify for fraud, and you could even face a serious sentence. Is that what you desire?" Denise remained quiet for an extended time. The hand holding her cocktail was trembling. She downed her drink in one gulp as if to give herself courage, and then stated in a shaky voice, "Robert promised me he'd provide me with a share of the land. He stated everything would be fine, that I would have it all. However, now I comprehend he simply used me." Hearing her, I felt a bit of pity. Denise, though misguided, was another victim of Robert's manipulation. However, I didn't permit my emotions to get the best of me. I looked at her intently. "You have one final opportunity to exit this clean. Tell the truth at the trial. I will take that into account." Just at that moment, the bar door swung open and Robert's two henchmen walked in. They looked around and their eyes locked on me sitting with Denise. They approached with unfriendly faces. Without hesitation, I removed my police badge from my pocket and placed it on the table. "Want to attempt something? Go ahead." The dim light of the establishment shone on the badge, and the two individuals stopped, slowly backing towards the door, their eyes still filled with hatred. Denise was breathing heavily, pale as a sheet, clinging to the edge of the table. I looked at her and stated in a grave but determined voice, "Observe, Robert cannot protect you. He's only going to drag you down with him." Denise bit her lip. Her eyes were torn between fear and determination. Finally, she nodded. "Okay, I'll testify, but you must promise me I'll be safe." I didn't promise extensively. I simply nodded. "If you do the correct thing, I'll do everything I can." I immediately contacted Rosales, informed him of the situation, and requested him to obtain a secure apartment on the outskirts for Denise to hide in. Exiting the bar, I walked down the cold, dark street, the wind making me shiver. However, internally, I felt a great relief. I understood the battle had shifted. Robert had just lost his most important piece. The morning of the trial, I awakened at 5 when the sky was still dark. I went to the kitchen and prepared a light chicken broth. The gentle aroma appeared to want to calm the tension that filled the house. I brought the tray to the bed where Sarah was still sleeping. Observing her there, her face still slightly swollen and her lips dry, squeezed my heart. I awakened her gently, whispering, "Eat something, sweetheart, so you'll have strength." Sarah opened her eyes, her gaze exhausted, but she nodded and sat up slowly. I assisted her in putting on a long, light blue dress and placed a thin scarf around her neck to cover the bruise that was still visible. I fixed her hair and stated softly, "You don't have to hang your head anymore." Sarah looked at me, her eyes watery, but she didn't say anything, simply took my hand as if it were the only way to feel secure. Outside the house, Commander Rosales was already waiting for us with a patrol vehicle. He greeted me with a nod. His look was serious but warm. "I've arranged an escort, Elizabeth. Everything will be fine today," he stated. I thanked him, feeling a bit of relief knowing I wasn't alone. On the way to the courthouse, I observed the community's individuals gathered in the square whispering. Some looked at us with curiosity, others nodded slightly, as if in support, but there were also those who shook their heads with mistrust. The rumors Robert had spread still hung in the atmosphere, and I understood that today's battle wasn't simply against him, but to reclaim the truth. Arriving at the courthouse entrance, I observed Robert. He was standing there in an impeccable suit, his face crimson and his gaze sharp as a blade. Beside him, the attorney, Valdivia, appeared calm, but I understood he was tense. Denise was there too, standing far from Robert, her arms crossed and her gaze distant. Observing her, I remembered the night at the bar when I convinced her to switch sides, and I felt a spark of hope. However, I understood today wouldn't be simple. I took Sarah's hand and led her into the courtroom. Inside, the location was packed. The old wooden benches creaked as individuals settled in. I observed Mrs. Camilla in the back row. She nodded at me encouragingly, as if to communicate she would always be there supporting us. Judge Arturo Cervantes entered, and the entire room stood up. The atmosphere felt thick. The only sound was the whir of the ceiling fan, like the heartbeat of the room. Attorney James began. His voice was deep and confident. He presented the case. Each piece of evidence was laid out before the court. The photographs of Sarah's injuries, Dr. Figueroa's report detailing the lesions, the footage from Mrs. Camilla's camera that recorded Sarah's cries in the early morning, and the copy of the forged land documents that Romero Alcazar had provided us. When James projected the footage on the screen, Sarah's knocks on the door and her faint sobs filled the room. I heard murmurs among the individuals. Some were wiping their eyes. I looked at Sarah beside me. Her hands were shaking and her head was bowed. I placed a hand on her shoulder and squeezed it gently, as if to communicate I was still there, that I would always be there. Attorney Valdivia rose to rebut. His voice was sharp. Sarah invented everything to extort my client. Elizabeth Arriaga abused her authority as a police officer to coerce and slander. Those words felt like daggers in my heart. I wanted to jump up to scream that he was lying, that Sarah's bruises were not an invention. However, James signaled for me to calm down. He presented Robert's threatening messages, which were clearly visible on the large screen. "Remain silent if you don't want to be replaced." The room fell silent. Sarah bowed her head. Her hands trembled more violently, and I understood she was remembering the months she lived in fear. I squeezed her shoulder, attempting to give her some of my strength. Then it was Denise's turn. She took the stand, trembling, her gaze hesitant. "Robert promised to provide me with a share of the land," she stated, her voice shaky but clear. He pressured me to accept the transfer documents, stating everything was arranged. But the truth is, he forged his wife's signature to steal the land from her. Robert jumped up, shouting, "You betrayed me!" The court guards had to force him to sit down while Judge Cervantes stated, sternly, "Order or I will have you removed from the courtroom." Denise bowed her head but continued to testify. Each word felt like a hammer shattering Robert's lies. Observing her, I felt a little relief, but I couldn't help the pain in my heart. Denise had been part of Sarah's suffering, but now she had chosen to be on the side of the truth. When it was my turn, I took the stand and swore before the court. I looked directly at the individuals, my voice firm. "I am a police officer, but today I am here as a mother. I will not permit anyone, not even my son-in-law, to destroy my daughter and mock the law." I pointed at Robert without a trace of fear in my eyes. "That man is not a husband. He is not a father. He is simply an abuser and a liar." The entire room murmured. Some of the individuals who had believed in Robert looked at each other, confused. I observed Mrs. Camilla's gaze. She nodded as if communicating I had done the correct thing. Finally, Judge Cervantes stood up to read the verdict. His voice was grave and clear, but I didn't hear every word. I only understood that he issued a protection order for Sarah, froze all of Robert's assets, nullified the land transfer, and sent the case to the district attorney's office to investigate the crimes of usury and domestic violence. A roar of murmurs filled the room. Robert slumped in his chair, his face pale, as if all his strength had vanished. Valdivia remained silent, removing his glasses to wipe away the sweat. I took Sarah's hand and led her out of there. The midday sun shone brightly on the courthouse steps, and I heard individuals whispering, "Elizabeth won. Justice won." However, internally, I understood that this victory did not erase the wounds Sarah had suffered. I only hoped that from this day forward, she could begin to find her smile again. The afternoon of the trial, when Judge Arturo Cervantes finished reading the verdict, the courtroom erupted in murmurs. I didn't hear every one of his words, but when I observed Robert collapse in his chair, his face pale, I understood we had won. The ruling dictated a protection order for Sarah, froze Robert's assets, nullified the fraudulent land transfer, and sent the case to the district attorney's office to investigate the crimes of domestic violence and usury. When I took Sarah's hand and we exited the courthouse, the midday sun was shining on the steps, and I heard individuals whisper, "Elizabeth won. Justice won." However, internally, I didn't feel victorious. I simply felt relief, as if a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. However, the pain was still there, like a scar that would never fully heal. That same afternoon, the police went to Robert's pawn shop to arrest him. Individuals crowded the street to watch. Some whistled at him, others shouted insults to his face. I wasn't there. However, the following morning, when the local newspaper published a photograph of Robert in a prison uniform and handcuffs under the headline, "Pawn shop owner arrested for violence and land fraud," I felt something unusual. It wasn't joy, it was a kind of liberation. He who had sat at my table, who had addressed me as mother-in-law, was now paying for what he had done. However, that feeling was quickly replaced by sadness. I had trusted him. I had believed he would care for Sarah. The pain of being betrayed by a family member, like a slow burn, still seared inside me. Denise disappeared from the community a few days following the trial. It was rumored she had gone to Monterrey to search for work, to start over. I didn't blame her. She had been part of Sarah's pain, but in the end, she had chosen the truth. Robert's two henchmen, the ones who called themselves Los Chamucos, were also arrested for witness tampering. The neighborhood suddenly felt calmer. There were no more hateful glares or silent threats. However, I understood that the wounds Robert had left on Sarah and me wouldn't disappear so easily. Sarah moved in with me permanently. The first few days she could barely sleep. She would awaken startled every night, sweating, screaming, "Mother, he's coming." In those moments, I would sit beside her, take her hand and whisper, "It's okay, sweetheart. You're safe now." However, observing Sarah, I observed myself years ago when I too kept silent in the face of my own pain. I transported her to Ana Quiroga, the psychologist, every week without fail. Ana listened to Sarah with patience, assisting her in facing her nightmares step by step. After a few weeks, I started to notice a transformation. Sarah no longer covered her face when she went out. She no longer hung her head when she walked through the market. One afternoon, I discovered her in the kitchen making enchiladas, and as she folded the tortillas, she sang softly. That song, as gentle as the wind, brought tears to my eyes. It had been so long since I had heard my daughter sing. It was as if the sun was starting to enter the house again. The community also began to transform its attitude. The neighbors who had doubted, who had believed Robert's rumors, now greeted me. Some approached to apologize with regret in their voices. "Mrs. Elizabeth, we didn't know the truth." I simply nodded without resentment. I comprehended that Robert's lies had been convincing, and not everyone possesses the courage to stand up to someone like him. Mrs. Camilla visited with a tray of sweet bread, and she embraced Sarah tightly. "You turned out stronger than your mother in her day." Observing them laugh together warmed my heart, as if people's kindness still existed despite the dark days. I continued my work at the station. Every daily patrol was a reminder of my duty. Every time I encountered a case of violence, I felt more determined to assist other women in breaking the silence. Once I discovered a young woman crying outside the station, her eyes crimson, clutching her purse. I sat beside her and stated in a soft voice, "You're not alone. My mother lived it. My daughter lived it, and I too remained silent once. However, today, I understand that silence only feeds the monster." The young woman looked at me. The tears were still streaming, but there was a new glint in her eyes. I understood I couldn't erase her pain, but at least I could demonstrate to her that someone was willing to listen. A few months later, Sarah felt strong enough to return to work. She obtained a job in an accounting office in the community center. That evening, she arrived home late, opening the door with a radiant smile. "Mother, I obtained the job." I stood up and embraced her with all my might, and we both cried. They weren't tears of pain, but of joy, of liberation. Observing Sarah there, smiling like the sun, reminded me of the little girl who used to chase after me in the yard, calling out, "Mother, look at me." I understood the wounds in her heart were still there, but she was learning to move forward, to find herself again. That evening I sat on the porch. The wind was blowing coolly. I remembered the night Sarah collapsed at my door, her face covered in bruises, informing me in a trembling voice what Robert had done to her. I remembered the months of struggle, the sleepless nights, the moments I believed I would break under the lies and mistrust of the entire community. However, then I looked at Sarah's smile today, and I thought, justice is sometimes slow, but when it arrives, it can give you back your breath, your laughter, and even your future. I took a sip of my coffee. It was cold now, but I felt a peace in my heart that I hadn't felt in an extended time. Sarah had returned, and although she carried the scars of the past, she had found a reason to keep fighting, not simply for my daughter, but for all the women who require someone to stand up for them. The story we tell is fictional, but it is based on some real events. The names and locations have been altered to protect the identities of those involved. We don't tell this to judge, but in the hope that someone will listen and stop to think. How many mothers are suffering in silence inside their own homes? I'm genuinely curious. If it were you in my place, what would you do? Would you choose to remain silent to keep the peace? Or would you dare to confront it all to get your voice back? I want to know what you think, because every story is a candle that can illuminate someone else's path. God always blesses, and I firmly believe that courage leads us to better days. Meanwhile, on the end screen, I leave you with two of the channel's most beloved stories. I assure you they will surprise you. Thank you for staying until the end.